So, after learning about all these different strategies, I've definitely found some in this block that I think would be really useful to use whether I have ELLs in my class or not. I think a lot of the most helpful ones to me personally I found were in the checking for comprehension section of this block. One of the first ones that I saw that I think would be really useful in any classroom is strategy number 44, which is to plan questions in advance. This is something that I never used to do until I worked in New York City. The school I worked at required us to plan questions and have them checked by supervisors for read alouds and for guided reading before we would teach. And it was a lot of work. That was just the way they required us to do it. But it was incredibly helpful for me as a teacher and for my students. I think it provided me with a way to make sure that my questions flowed, that they built upon one another, that when I'd ask a question, it was appropriate and I could think of like exactly what I wanted the students to say in response. It just made my teaching much clearer for everyone. By planning my questions ahead of time, I was also able to think about the depth of the questions that I was given. That when I'd start a read aloud, I might start with really more simple questions like who the characters were, what the setting is, something you can just go back into the text. And then as we progressed through the book or spent more time analyzing it, I was able to go on to deeper thinking questions and I didn't just fall back on to the first question that came into my head. So I think planning questions in advance is definitely really useful for every student, regardless of whether you're in an ELL class or not. I also really liked strategy number 45. This one said to promote active listening. It was on page 90 of our strategies book. I found that this is really hard for all students, not just students who are learning English. I'm sure it is exceptionally hard for them because they have to do it in another language. But I found that all students in elementary school, at least, really struggle to actively listen to one another. So I think that giving them strategies and showing them what it looks like to actively listen and instruct them in what that means would be really helpful for all of them, because I found that a lot of times when a teacher or a peer is talking, a lot of the class will just be in their own head thinking about something else. So I think that this is just a good strategy for all students. It's something that all students need to learn how to do to be successful learners. I also like strategy number 49, the think, pair, share. This is something that I've used a lot and I've seen used a lot in various different classrooms. Any classrooms who use the Teachers College reading and writing program do this all the time, because after your lesson, before your kids go off to work independently, they usually get to talk to each other about what they're thinking and what's going to happen. So I think that this think, pair, share, regardless of whether you have E&L students, is really helpful for the whole class. It's something that I've seen being used in tons of different classrooms in lots of different ways, and administrators and people who, to make programs really encourage this. I think that it just gives the students a low stress way to think through their thoughts with somebody else before they have to share out loud. Finally, one of the last strategies that I think is really important for us to do, whether or not we have E&L students, is strategy 50, which is just extra wait time. I think I've said in a previous video of mine that it takes me a little while to put my thoughts together. So as a student, I always appreciated when a teacher didn't just call on the first student to raise their hand, that they would give everyone time to put their thoughts together and then choose somebody to respond. I think just giving students the extra wait time is important. Sometimes the first thing that comes into your head is not the best. So even the students who think quickly would benefit from having some extra wait time to evaluate their thoughts and expand on them and potentially come up with something even better than that initial thought. I don't think being fast is necessarily making them a better learner. So by providing them with that extra wait time, it just gives everyone a little bit of extra time to think and process. Definitely helpful for E&Ls, but helpful for everyone in the classroom. So these were just a few of the strategies that I found to be exceptionally helpful for every student, regardless of whether they are E&L or not.